Hello again, this is Charlie Belfontaine, and you're listening to the Home Buyers Hour of the Chicago Housing Experts right here on WCPT AM 820. We'll make up names as we go along. We're trying to change everything here. Heck yeah.
About those two. And, well, stay tuned because I may ruin 2 relationships between now and the end of the show. So, that'll be fun. If you want to know more about me, my name is Patrick Loftus. I'm a real estate lawyer. My law firm's called Loftus Law. I can be found most easily right on your phone. Like literally it's in your pocket or sitting there on your passenger seat or in the little harness that you have. If you're a boomer or older like my dad, you've got like a hip holster where you can like quick draw that thing like Doc Holliday. But I'm there. Wherever that phone is, I'm there. Dial up that Instagram, Loftus_law. Dial up to TikTok, Loftus Law. You can come see my shorts on YouTube.
Oh, my goodness. I don't even know how to respond to that, I mean...
It requires no response.
As far as being the only boomer in the room right now, I guess I don't know if I should be offended.
Where is your holster?
I don't have a holster. I call it a pocket.
I know.
And it's on my pants.
I know what you're getting for Christmas.
Good.
I'm going to stop at TJ Maxx and get you the chunkiest holster. You will knock that thing on every door frame that you walk through until you throw it in the garbage.
Well, let's start focusing on what's important here.
Door frames.
All right. So I want to get your attorney's opinion on something that happened to our company this week. So we ended up doing a home inspection. And something that we're adding to our services is permit searches, right? And as I look these things up, it's actually pretty cool. I could see when people apply for it. Now, the city of Chicago has it very open on their website, and it's really easy to find them.
Yeah,
all right?
Just Google Chicago Department of Buildings permit or violation lookup, and it'll be there. You punch in the address, and it's pretty good. You can't, it's not the definitive, we look no further for any and all information available. The best way to go about that in any municipality, including the city of Chicago, is to file or to submit a Freedom of Information Act request to the Department of Buildings, wherever you're trying to seek that information. But it's always nice to be able to have it at hand, to have at least something preliminary that, if depending on your situation, it might lead you to go that next step and submit a FOIA.
I couldn't agree. And I was going to just shoot that out there. You did spell it all out. I know you did that for me, the Freedom of Information Act, and thank you. But a lot of people do commonly refer to it as a FOIA.
Correct.
Yeah, where it comes in there. So this house, they did get a bunch of permits. You could actually see the contractors and recognize some of the names, so they did it all legitimately. But they also had a new 200-amp electrical service. All right, this house was built in the late 50s, which is typically a 60 or 100-amp electrical service that they're going to have on that property. They never pulled a permit for it. They put they kept the original service entrance cable coming from the pole. They left that on there, which is a number 2 aluminum wire. That's going to be rated for 100 amps. So I guess they did have 100 amps there originally because that's the size of the wire. I think that's common sense. The service mast that went up through the roof, that's the pipe that the wires go into as it comes into the house, that was still 1.25 inches, which is going to be rated for 100 amps. All right. They did pull thicker wires through that, and they jammed them in there. And those wires themselves were rated for 200 amps. They were 2-aught copper. And then the splices that gets made by the electric company, those splices were left exposed, both energized conductors. It's common that the neutral or the grounded conductor is left exposed, but the energized conductors are not. And that was my biggest beef. Now, don't get me wrong. We documented the service mast being too small. We documented the service entrance cables or the wires coming from the pole being too small, we find a lot of unpermitted work. All right. I don't really go off the deep end on it. I've almost become callous to it. I get it. It's wrong. And one of the analogies that I use is speeding. So in other words, if you're doing 56 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, you're breaking the law. All right. Any way you look at it. But I think most people shrug their shoulders, go, come on, Charlie, really? You know, and I agree. I don't think it's really that big of a deal. You know, going 5, 10 over limit. I'm not trying to tell everybody go break the law. I'll still be getting passed like there's no tomorrow.
As a licensed attorney, I can only give the advice is to follow the law, Charlie.
Thank you very much.
You know,
I appreciate that.
If you want to go rogue and advise people, I mean, look, I disclaim any advice that it is okay to speed, because if you get into an accident, it's not my fault. You should have been going the speed limit. I'm sorry.
And I get that, but everybody's their choice. You're asking me for my opinion, I'm going to share it. It's that simple.
I have insurance, and I need to make sure that I am covered.
There
Thank you
it is.
very much.
So, and when it comes to those wires, because I'm so callous, I see that as doing like 60 or 65 miles an hour. Is it wrong? Yes, it's wrong. But I don't really get too alarmed. And I don't really see a lot of, oh, that's a code violation, so the community, the city, the village, the township, whatever, they're going to come storming into the house and say, oh, you're going to have to do all this all over again because it's bad. That just doesn't happen around here.
No. Well, depending on whether you ask Charlie or you ask me, if you ask Charlie, it's because they are just so attentive to their jobs that they don't have the resources to.
Who's they? The municipalities?
The inspectors, the fine inspectors of the municipalities, they are so dialed in on what they are focused on that they just don't have the resources to go out there and check on everyone. Whereas from my perspective, I mean, you know, it's hard to check up on that stuff when you don't leave your truck.
No, boy. Oh, boy. I don't know if you're just trying to make me speechless or what, or you're just trying to get me triggered.
Yeah, this is the when you spend any portion of your life on building homes and on job sites, you will develop a certain I don't know, biases, or you'll just feel like, you know, these village inspectors, what a gig that is to to kind of just be able to, just do whatever.
Yeah, we kind of joke a little bit because they do have all the authority. All right, they do have police powers. They can go ahead and force people to do stuff,
and they will not be shy about telling you how much authority they have.
Exactly, but they also don't have any accountability. You know, very rarely, whenever something does get missed, I've ever hear that, there's any repercussions from it. No, there really isn't.
Does any, what would a village trustee, know about any of the intricacies of whatever havoc that that the village inspectors are wreaking on a construction project? I mean, quite frankly, I would probably be happy to know that their inspectors are being tough on those crooked construction guys who are out there just making money hand over fist and building whatever they feel like building and blah blah blah. But,
and I really believe that what you just said right there is the number one goal of most of the building inspectors, is to protect the residents from the unscrupulous contractors and make sure that the work is done right.
Make sure they don't make any money. Exactly.
And make sure they don't make any money. Will you behave? No, but it's more for protecting our residents. Now, I've also had home buyers, clients of ours, where they felt the need to contact the local municipality and say, hey, there's a code violation over here. Can you go ahead and make them fix this? They're not going to do that. And they're not going to go into somebody else's house and get involved in something like this.
I mean, if they do, boy, I've had situations where that happened, and that as much as you might think you're the righteous one, even though your intentions may be impure, easily backfire on you. I don't recommend doing that unless you see something that's like, my goodness gracious, that is going to get someone very hurt or worse. I really wouldn't, because I mean, look, even someone like you who would be more apt or more likely to know what a building code might say. Listen, go take a look at how thick those books are. I mean, and
how many of them?
And for each, you got plumbing, you've got electric. I mean, each of these books is about 3 inches thick. Nobody has that stuff memorized. All right. Not even the inspectors do. And so,
AI Charlie does. That much I will share.
I mean, sure. How about I don't have any basis to dispute that, but
Talking about you use that thing more than anyone else. You get on there and ask it as many dumb questions as you can.
well, and most of them I can't repeat on the public broadcast airwaves. So unless it's like after 10 p.m. and then I can get a little saucy. But this program is not aired at such a time where I can divulge the things I ask AI Charlie. Only because I know that you're going to see it, and
I do
it's
see
going
it.
to annoy you.
And no, it doesn't annoy me. It actually cracks me up. So I do enjoy that quite a bit.
All right,
But-
so I've derailed things. You were talking about
This is all good.
this electric service and some of the deficiencies that you found.
So let's talk about risk and rewards. This is where I need you. What are the risks of somebody buying a home and we are aware of unpermitted work, wasn't done correctly, it wouldn't pass. If it was, it wouldn't be approved, or shouldn't. I shouldn't say wouldn't. I shouldn't predict the future. It shouldn't be approved if it was inspected by a municipality. What are the ramifications for my clients or the sellers?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a whole decision tree, right? Like, if something's there, right? Let's just start with a question you didn't ask me. If something's already there and it doesn't comply with the current code, if when it was built, it was compliant and the codes have just changed, it's probably fine.
Well, this is important. It is fine. All right. There's nothing in any code book that says that everybody has to bring things up to the new standards or today's standards. Those codes only apply when the construction is being done, and that's it.
Right. So if your 1950s home doesn't have AFCI breakers
Or GFCI.
it doesn't mean it's inherently dangerous or defective. It just means it was built when it was built, and if you're approaching a seller about something like that, they're going to say, look, this is how it's always been, and I'm still alive, and it's a fair point. So setting that aside, if work was done, and I think in this instance we're talking about work done that would have required a permit, so that's another part of the decision tree. Okay, so we've decided we've got to go further down the line because it's not something that existed and was code compliant when it was installed. What was a permit necessary? And I think to install an upgraded electrical service, I think in most cases it's going to need a permit.
I wouldn't know one that it doesn't.
And so
In fact, I'll even tell you this much because I upgraded our electric service in our house. The electric company would not, and I live in the north suburbs, the electric company would not make that connection until it was permitted, inspected, and approved. Then they'll go ahead and connect me to the grid.
that's interesting. Then it would lead me to question whether that it was when they did that work, was it reconnected to ComEd by ComEd, or was it done by just whoever the contractor was? In which case, you might have a whole separate issue from the permitting thing. Is you may have ComEd saying, look, we've got issues with what's going on here.
This is what I advise my client.
And good luck fighting with them. But let's turn back to the permitting issue. So we've decided, okay, it's something that was done that needed to be done, or it was done after. Right. Well, I've lost track. It's work that was done for which a permit would have been required, that a permit wasn't pulled. Now, what might happen? So the seller at that point, they're going to downplay it. They're going to go, look, this happens all the time, just like you said. I would say it's not common, but it's not uncommon. All right. And it's definitely something you want to know about as a buyer. And quite frankly, as a seller, it's always going to be better. And in most cases, always is one of those words that I try to hesitate before using, because there seems to be an exception anytime someone says the word always or never. But it's a situation where you're better off as a seller, I think, disclosing something like that so that you can own the narrative. Um,
I'm liking this. Keep going.
Well, see, and why is it important to own the narrative? I think it's fair to assume that just about any buyer can work out, and especially if they've retained a lawyer. I mean, any of us part of our basic process, especially in the city of Chicago, is going to be to do that simple search because it is that easy. You know, it's kind of almost you're kind of not even getting to the minimum standard if you don't punch. You know, you should have it bookmarked on your browser. You punch in the address, you see what's there, just to get an idea of what kind of inspections have been done. Do we have any outstanding failed inspections? What permits have been pulled? All that stuff is going to be pretty readily available. Now, knowing that information is so easy to get at for a buyer, from a seller's perspective, I think it's good to be like, look, when you do that search, you are going to find that, whatever. I replaced a furnace and we didn't get permits, and that's pretty commonplace. Something like that, I would probably tend to agree with the seller. And now, from the seller there, and this falls into the category of things I can disclose that aren't going to hurt me, and in fact have the opposite effect, which is to increase the level of trust between me as the seller and the buyer.
Now you're talking.
I've now got some credibility in the transaction. I've just increased the chances of having a smooth transaction without really sacrificing anything. I think that is a really good strategic move. But even something where you're going to front the notion that, hey, here's an extreme example, but let's say that you had you've got a cottage, right? And you took the attic and you turned it into a second floor, and you didn't get permits for it. That happens, not so, unfortunately, more often than it should, put it that way. I mean, look, permits are a pain to get. They're expensive. They may just not be in someone's budget, or you've got an unscrupulous contractor that goes in and they go, I can do this work, and they bid it out and they look at what the materials are going to cost and they go, maybe I can just avoid this whole permit thing and then pocket that money. Flip a coin, which one it is. And if you front that issue, I think that at that point you can negotiate it in a better way. Even if it needs to get negotiated, you may, in a market like we have right now, you may be able to front that issue and just say, look, unfortunately, that's a situation. I'm not prepared to negotiate it. It is what it is. I've got 3 other backup offers, and one of them is going to accept this situation. Yeah. And so either you do it or someone else will. In which case, I mean, look, not for nothing, but now you have saved yourself the possibility of getting sued later on over that issue. So you're doing yourself all kind of favors there. Could you lose a buyer over that? Sure. But I think that is the better outcome necessarily, again, in a market like today.
Yeah.
And,
we got people paying $50,000 over asking price. What's the difference between taking out a $10,000 repair versus paying $50,000 over asking price?
I mean, because one is a known quantity and the other is a surprise.
Okay.
Right. So, that $10,000
and you made the decision. The decision is not being made for you.
Yeah, whether you liked it or not. I mean, just generally speaking, people, they're already paying $50,000 over, and now you're telling me there's another $10,000 potential issue.
Well, that's a whole nother story. Yeah.
Now, so where does the buyer go with this information? If the seller is just going to put their foot down, and I've seen it recently within the past couple of weeks, where a seller goes, we did this work on the property. It's substantial. We should have got a permit. We didn't. And they, as you would, they try to downplay it, but they probably played it the right way. They said, okay, what do you want to do with that information, buyer? And I talked to my buyer about it. And what did I tell my buyer? I said, look, you're buying a single family detached home. So unlikely that anyone in the house is going to call the permitting authorities on you to get an inspection done. And they don't generally show up at people's...
They're not going to.
Yeah, they're not.
I don't know anybody who's done that. Unless it's like tall grass or something outside. They'll drive by the neighborhood. but they're not going to walk on the property.
I have one example, but I'll get into that later. But it's very much the outlier. But what's the risk for the buyer? The risk for the buyer is that the building department, worst case scenario, if they were to discover that this work had been done without a permit, they could make you tear all that work out and restore it to its previous condition.
They do have that authority.
That is on the table. Now, is it most likely? It's probably the least likely one. Practically speaking, unless they just hate you, if you've upset your alderman somehow, or you've just got really terrible bad luck, unless those things are going on, the more likely consequence is that they're going to make you get a permit after the fact. Now, that might not sound that bad, but it can be quite expensive. You're most likely going to have to get architectural plans. You're going to have to get a contractor to sign off on it. None of that's free.
Going to be a hard part, because not a lot of contractors are comfortable signing off on somebody else's work.
Well, that's why it ain't going to be free. And they may say, look, obviously work done without a permit, it didn't get inspected, and there's every likelihood that it may not be compliant with the code, in which case you will at that point need to do additional work. So all of that can get quite expensive. Now, what's the likelihood? It's very low. Yeah. Now, here's where it is most likely to happen, and that is if you decide you want to do work and you're gonna do it the right way. You or your contractor is going to go in and get permits. If they compare it to what the plans that are submitted and the anticipated work, if they compare that to what they think is out there based on their file, and they go, how did this get to this place? That's where they may that's where you may find yourself with a problem going forward, having to go back and resolve that issue first, yeah. And then you can perhaps do the work, assuming you've got any money left over from that process. So it's the risk is small, but the consequence can be quite large. So it's one of those things. It's really up to your risk tolerance if you want to get involved. But the more you're in an urban area, the more you're in an older home, the more likely you're going to encounter these kinds of things. And you may find yourself in a situation where you have to accept, more risk than you were necessarily anticipating.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify a little bit of being a retired government employee, even though I was on the fire department. It's always been the same mindset. As a government employee, our job is to protect the public and to make sure that we maintain a good quality of life in the neighborhood. All right, that does include building inspections and making sure other homes are safe and things like that. But it doesn't, like our police. We want them to protect our people, but do we really want them to be on the street corners when moms are dropping their kids off and they didn't come to 100% complete stop and get a ticket for something like that? I don't think so. There's got to be some wiggle room that comes in there. Let people not break, but bend a little bit.
There's relationships, right? And
yeah,
the non-sinister example of a relationship is just where you're known by a building department or a group of inspectors to be someone who does work the right way and who does conscientious work and doesn't leave people in danger at the end. That's where a good contract with good relationships is going to be a benefit for you as someone who's hiring a contractor. Now,
they can lose that relationship real quick.
They can. I mean, the sinister example of that is a lot of brown paper bags being handed off in different.
I know where you're going, and I just don't want to believe it. But
I live in Chicago, man. It's like if you know anything about Operation Greylord, Operation Silver Shovel, if judges historically have been on the take in Cook County, I'm just not. I'm not prepared to believe that inspectors haven't also.
I hear you. No, I hear with all that stuff. It's just, I don't know. I just don't want to. I don't want to. I know there's going to be bad people in there, but I know as a group, the municipalities aren't going to tolerate it. If it does get exposed, then they're going to go ahead and step on it. Private inspector side, our company did an inspection on a new construction home, and this was the final walkthrough, and we did it. And there was one room in the laundry room where there was no outlet in the wall. All right, well, I know the codes require outlets to be spaced every 12 feet, that are in here, but there's nothing on the wall. And, well, all they did was drywall over it, all right? But the builder in this case, when my client asked, where's the outlet that belongs here, the builder comes back and said, well, it met code, everything's fine, the inspectors approved it, all this stuff is fine, so there's no reason to have an outlet there. And I'm like, and you're laughing, obviously, because that's not true. And just because a human being makes the mistake, that doesn't mean it's okay. All right? And that's what happened. The building inspectors missed it, and this guy refused to fix it. And so I was actually friends with the building inspector in that area, and I gave him a call, and I said, hey, what's going on with this? On this house, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I did drop the dime, all right? But they still had to get their final walkthrough. And, he went up to the builder and goes, listen, we got a relationship here. Why aren't you taking care of this? That's supposed to be there, and sure enough, it was there. The drywall, the guys just put a piece of drywall over it. All they had to do was cut it out and insert the outlet. It wasn't that big of a problem to come in there. But that, my friend tells me that, that guy is no longer, they're going through some emotional things. It's a business breakup, but they don't get their free passes, or they don't get their courtesy that they built up. Again, it takes time to build a relationship of trust. It takes seconds to destroy it.
Well, and when the thing that occurs to me is like, a house is an incredibly complicated
it really is.
Structure. And it's not getting less complicated as time goes on. I mean, when I was last building houses in the 90s, I was already very, very complicated. Fast forward 30 years, I can only imagine how much more complicated it's got. I mean, we didn't have to install any kind of, Ethernet stuff. We didn't have anywhere near.
We didn't even have installation in a lot of these things. We had houses built way back when with no installation.
In the 90s, we had insulation. Well, we definitely had insulation.
Before then. But even when we look at the houses that are post-World War II, there was a lot of things that are changed. And now we go ahead and have these super foam insulated homes that are airtight. You get moisture moving through a little tiny hole. And I did say moisture. I meant to say air. That air is going to bring a ton of moisture. And we still build with wood. And wood and water don't play nice together.
No, typically not. I mean, you can see the evolution from galvanized to copper to PEX.
Mm-hmm.
I hear is a very reliable building material.
Well, PEX is going to be the new PB. Let me give you a heads up on that. There's a lot of problems with the PEX pipes too.
Well, we don't use PB here in the Chicago area. I guess stick with the copper, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, I mean, and I've heard things about spray foam that would give me pause whether or not I want that in my home as well. I don't know enough to say yay or nay on it, but I'd want to do my research as some folks are fond of saying. But yeah, I mean, the point being that an inspector and as much as I would like to just trash them, consistently and never say anything nice. They're one person, and to say that, well, they inspected every square inch of this home, and they didn't find a single thing wrong with it. Whenever I hear that from a contractor, you can see the smile on my face. I'm just like, yeah. You and I both know how much what you said is a word I can't say here on the public airwaves.
I can say it in Spanish. El toro caca. That's what it is.
I will have to confirm that with I think there's a Spanish language program down the hall. We can ask them.
Maybe
the Polish language program over.
That's dupayash. I know how to say all these things in every language.
I don't think switching languages, and I could I could swear up and down in Russian. I don't think that is going to pass muster with the.
You could say bull poo poo. That is not a bad word.
I'm sorry, Devin. When you go to cut this up, and I am not going to swear in Russian right now, but I could. I could. You'd have to look all that up.
But no, it goes back to I hear home inspectors say the same thing. Well, I never miss anything. I catch everything when I do it. And I'm here to tell you that every home inspector misses something.
Absolutely.
On every single inspection.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't happen.
Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And you know, especially in the situation that you find yourself in, having the daunting task. And it's, I mean, in the old days, when I say the old days, I mean, like, I remember when I first started practicing law, 20 some odd years ago, we didn't have these like fancy schmancy 75-page inspection reports. It was a 1 or 2 pager at most, and it was just a list. There was no pictures. There was none of that stuff, and it would get faxed to you at best.
The curly paper fax?
I don't. Yeah, at some point I do recall a curly paper fax. We may have had a plain paper fax by the time I graduated law school.
You are hoity-toity.
I mean, and nowadays it's like it's so. I mean, back then you'd be like, look, man, I'm in there. I've got maybe like a measuring tape and a speed square, but I'm doing the best with the available materials. And I know you've got all kinds of electronic devices, and you're like Batman with the utility belt when you walk into an inspection to find all kind of things. But still,
Which
it's
is
not perfect.
true. It's not perfect. We just had one item that our client or our inspectors missed. It was a big crack in a sewer pipe, and it was so obvious that it was there. It's like, how does somebody walk by it? You get focused on something else. They had a leaky pipe in another spot. They were focusing on that. They were trying to help people, and yeah, they missed it. I don't want to put the blame on my client, though.
Well, let's say it's not rained for 2 weeks, and then in between the inspection and closing, you have got a monsoon. And they go, man, there's water. And you go, well, they're just, it had all dried. Like, I don't, you don't control the weather. And
not everything presents itself.
That's true.
Sometimes they do when you still miss them, though. All right. And I don't judge people by mistakes they make. I understand that everybody makes mistakes. I judge people by how they handle the mistakes. And with that situation, all I did was apologize. We're going to make it right. Don't know what we can do. We'll figure it all out together. I'm not going to rebuild an entire house because of a plumbing stack, but I will get that plumbing stack so it's watertight and prepare. If that means replacing it, we're going to replace it. Now, I got off the hook on this one because everything was caught early enough, and the sellers are opting to pay for the replacement of the pipe. But I definitely would have done it. And I got a real nice phone call from the client this morning saying that I just got to tell you, I'm glad we didn't argue. I'm glad you owned up to it. I'm glad you were going to take care of it. And they were just called me out of the blue. I didn't ask for anything, just to tell me the sellers are doing it and that they were happy that I would have done it otherwise. And I would have. All right. And I'm not in the insurance business. Don't get me wrong. But I don't want people to be punished for my mistake. That's the bottom line.
What a guy. What a guy.
It's the right thing to do. But let's go back to this situation with the bear. You know what? Like I said, you said it's not often that unpermitted work is done. I think it's way more often than you think, or maybe I misunderstood you.
Well, I said it's not. I said it's not uncommon.
It's
right?
very common.
So it's somewhere. It's not anywhere near 100% of homes. It's probably somewhere between, I don't know, 30 and 40% of homes you'll find something.
You know what? And yeah, I don't know what to say. It depends on the age of the home. We can't lump the 1902s with the 2024s. It's going to be different. But we have a lot of post-World War II stock in the Chicagoland area. And a lot of work has been done on those properties. And I think we're more like in the 90-plus percentile where unpermitted work was done.
I mean, if you're throwing in water heaters and furnaces and AC condensers, those all require permits in a lot of places. Like I know I got banged up by the city of Elgin for, I thought I was going to get, when they did my rental inspection, I thought I was going to get a attaboy for replacing all the mechanicals all one summer. That was a fun summer. And what I got instead was, I don't see permits for the water heater furnace. And I was just like, man, you do not get any credit for doing right. But the good news is I went back to the contractors. I was like, I know why you guys didn't pull permits, and I'm not even mad, but if you could go and sort that out, I'd be real happy. And they did. So it's good.
That is good. But and no, that is fantastic. And that's more of a suburban thing than a city of Chicago thing, where it comes out to, them doing the rental inspections and them going ahead and catching things like that. That's a whole nother thing. And that's more of the, because it's an annual or biannual or something like that. It's either 1, 2, 3 years that they do these.
It's 1 or 3, depending on if you meet certain criteria.
Yeah, and usually the cleaner, the nicer everything is, the fewer or more far apart that it comes in there.
It depends on who's in charge at the time.
So most of the stuff that I end up seeing is where somebody is going to pull like non-metallic cable, also known as Romex, and they'll run a new outlet in there, and stuff like that.
You'll never get a permit for that, so you wouldn't go to apply for one.
In the city of Chicago, the answer is correct. In the suburbs, they want you to do all that stuff. They want to go ahead and market, but a lot of people don't. So, I have become callous to these sort of things. But there's times where, like, let's take the non-metallic cable. I know that Chicagoland and Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, and there may be a couple of other major metropolitan areas as well.
Anywhere there's a strong electrical workers union, I would suggest.
That may be true. All right.
Find,
I don't know why.
Requirements for conduit. You don't know why.
I don't know why. I'm not going there. I am pro-union.
More work there is to put in conduit than there is to put in Romex. I mean, come on.
But it makes it. That's why we have some of the safest electricity in the world.
Absolutely.
All right. And I'm talking about here in the Chicagoland area. So all residential buildings in our area are required to put pipe in there. Now, the further away we get from the city, those requirements do fall away. All right, and non-metallic cable in most of Illinois in residential buildings is acceptable. There's nothing wrong with the product at all as long as it's installed safely.
We always piped all our buildings. I've never seen Romex installed in new construction, but maybe that's because I haven't been in that game since the 90s. But.
Maybe. And it all depends on where you are in the city. And this is residential. Commercial, everywhere in the United States, all commercial buildings are in pipe. And one of the best arguments that I've ever heard somebody say, well, is your commercial properties in pipe? They go, yeah. Well, why do you do that? Well, because it's safer. Why is the residence of the home not allowed to be as safe as the commercial properties? And I thought that was a good argument, but I know the answer. It's because of life-threatening. No, it's not money. It's the life-threatening. When you're in a commercial building and you're going to have 20, 50 people in there, if something goes wrong, you have a larger chance to hurt people, let alone if you're just having a single family. Now it's your choice. You're the king of your castle. You do what you want. You want to risk your life. That's what it's going to be, but we're giving you opportunities to do things right.
You have such a healthier view on the world than I do.
Yep.
Everyone's corrupt. Everyone's looking to save a buck, or unless they see someone that has money, they're looking to take it from them. Whereas Charlie's like, look, we're just looking for safety. And you know what? Maybe I need to talk to my therapist about that.
I'm not going there at all. You stay the way you are. I value you. But let's just think, what are the risks of somebody buying a house with known issues like this? And, now in this situation, my biggest problem was the exposed connectors. All right. When I got bare metal that's only a few inches from each other and there's no breaker that's going to pop if they touch, everything that's available on the grid is going to attempt to make one heck of a big spark because there's nothing slowing it down, right? And it's not going to stop. We're not going to trip a breaker that's going to cancel all that sparking that comes in there. Those wires are thick. They're hard to bend. But, heck, we get weather. We get snow. We get everything else. And now we're only a foot or two above the roof line on these sort of things. That's not smart.
Well, there's never an easy answer to any of these questions, right? And it boils down to, as Charlie, you're fond of saying, what's the cost? How are we going to compare it to the rest of the transaction?
Yeah.
There are plenty of situations I can think of where you might look at that and say, okay, it's definitely got to get fixed. It's a dangerous situation. I understand that there are not only municipal concerns, there's also utility concerns. There's gonna be a lot of people who are going to be stretching as much red tape as they can in my way to resolve this. But the dollars and cents make it make sense. Whereas if you're a buyer and you're just buying a place to live there and you don't have a big extra pool of money to sink into it, because let's face it, I don't think that whatever you put into making that right, if you will, is not, you're not going to get that back out when you go to sell. You will have taken a dangerous situation and rendered it safe. And a buyer isn't going to give you extra credit for doing that. They're going to go, I'm glad you did that. That probably benefited you, as much as anyone, since you own it. And my expectation is I'm buying a safe place for my family to live. So good, well done. You did that, but here's what the market says your house is worth. Whereas some of the more, let's say, sexy improvements that people like to do, finishes mainly, are going to maybe move the needle as far as your ROI. And, that's why people tend to skimp on some of that stuff that is on the insides. It doesn't necessarily strike the eyeball quite the same way as quartz countertops do, or a really fancy bunch of plumbing fixtures.
You're talking sales now, and people make emotional decisions when they purchase something.
I'm talking about, how do we evaluate it from a potential buyer? And really where I was going with that is if you're paying at market and then you're going to have to pay more, it's really going to have to make some kind of sense for you outside of the strictly the dollars and cents. Because I'm going to guess it, just given what you've described in terms of this situation, you will find another home that has a properly installed, permitted, no problems, electrical service. That is not common in my experience to see an improperly installed electrical service. So, honestly, the unpermitted work, I see that a lot less than I see the failed inspection, the deferred maintenance. That's more what I'm likely to see.
When you say that, you mean more likely to see when you're reviewing home inspector reports?
Well, when I'm looking at the permit / violation history, I might see a permit for, what I'd like to see is like a permit for a porch that I can cross check on the inspection report. This looks like the inspector says it's between 5 and 8 years old, and I can see that a permit was pulled 6 years ago. Love to see that, right? That's the kind of thing that you really would like to see. Now, more likely than not, however, in a lot of instances, a seller is often selling because either the city is already after them for deferred maintenance that they either can't or don't want to pay to do, or they see things that are coming down the pipe and they want to get out before that happens. And because otherwise, look, if a property is cash flowing and you don't really have to put much into it, unless you are at a point where you need to convert that into another, convert that value into something else because you're retiring or there's some other life change, your kids are going to school, you need to cash that out, or even you're taking that and moving up the next step on the property ladder. More likely, you're most likely to do that when it's time to reach in your pocket and pay off those capital improvements that you've been putting off.
No, that's interesting. Now, are you thinking with what you just said, is that more for investors, or is that still the same for single-family homeowners?
No, that's going to be more for investors.
For investors,
More for
okay.
investors. I'm really thinking more like multi-unit. For the single family, yeah, I mean, you're less.
And this was a single family home.
Yeah, well, I think we're, the two main examples that we've discussed were both single family homes, and yeah, that when those things pop up, you at the very least want to equip the buyer, or whoever, whichever side of it, you want to equip them with the proper information so that they can make whatever decision that they want to make based on that they're not just sleepwalking into a nightmare. And I wake up in a cold sweat thinking about that call 8 months down the line where someone's like, hey, there's a problem, and I think, gee, that seems like something I should have looked into. Happens only in the rarest of circumstances, and fortunately most of the time it's like, oh yeah, I could not have helped with that, in which case, phew, for me, but for the client, it doesn't necessarily minimize the impact for the client. And I'm usually like, hey, just make sure you are well documenting everything so that when the time comes and you've solved whatever the problem is, we can circle back and evaluate if there's someone to go after about it.
So there's a lot of things I actually want to sum up a little bit about our conversation today, and thank you, by the way, because this was very valuable to me. And so I think the biggest thing that I heard here is that everybody has a freedom of choice. All right, and you can choose to buy, not buy, negotiate, but so the sellers also have the same freedom of choices. Things are not going to be perfect. We document on an average of 70 issues in a home inspection report. So we find problems all the time. Now, we've had houses with as little as 20 and houses as much as 150. So that's just an average number that comes in there. But our goal and what we want to do is give our clients education so they can make their own decisions, all right? And, one of the things about home inspectors, and this is going to be aimed towards other home inspectors out there, when you tell somebody something's wrong, they are asking you for your opinion. But we need to go ahead and document those things in the proper format so that we're making it clear this is strictly my opinion on these things. Other people will have different opinions. That's all of us. We all have different opinions, and everybody's right because it's my opinion.
It's one of the worst aspects of being human is that other people have wrong opinions.
Wrong opinions. Thank you so much. That actually cracks me up a lot, But it comes back to if you put everything down in writing and you do it in a certain format, and we train home inspectors and we teach them this, that it's FOG is what we call it. That's the acronym. It stands for fact, opinion, and guidance. All right. So in this situation, because of the electric, we identified the bare connectors. We identified that the service mast was too small. We identified that the service line coming from the pole was too small, according to this size service that comes in there. And I did give my opinion on these things. My opinion on the mast, yeah, it's wrong. But again, I don't see it as life-threatening right away. Can something go really bad? Absolutely it can. The risk or the chances of something going really bad are very small. But those exposed connectors out there on the roof and being so close to the roof line, that bothered me. All right. And that, my opinion, was this is a little bit more serious. Or not a little bit, a lot more serious. And now we do need to correct this one because I think the chances of something going bad are high. And then I'm looking at the snowball effect. So my guidance is get hold of the electric company or the electrician that did this, see what they can do to make this whole thing safe where it comes with it. And they may have to get the permits. And if they don't, you want to take it as well, that's your choice, right? But in this situation, it was more of a, I want to get that stuff fixed. But then I got a feeling that when we open up Pandora's box to get that splice fixed, that's going to open up all the other stuff because the permits weren't done. That's what I'm afraid of for them.
And that's kind of the thinking that really can tie your hands up real good as a buyer, which is,
But that is my job to tell them that, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, more information, as long as it's accurate information.
Accurate is key.
I did more accurate information is better than less. I mean, I've had situations where lawyers gave certain advice to their clients, and I'm like, wouldn't have given that advice. But like you said, lots of people are out there being wrong. One thing I want to talk about real quick, which is that there is sometimes a misconception that because a buyer's getting title insurance, that's going to cover them for any kind of code issue or something that might happen. I think the word insurance kind of
That's not true though, is it?
People. It is not true.
Okay.
Even if there is like outstanding violations, code violations, if there are failed inspections, even if there's a God forbid a municipal building court case active on the property, if there's no lis pendens, which shows in the public record, that's the title insurance is not going to cover that at all. So if you're a seller and you're thinking, well, I should be good because I'm going to pay a handsome sum for a buyer's title insurance policy, unfortunately that's not going to mitigate that problem at all. And likewise, if you're on the buyer side, just because you're getting title insurance, title insurance, unfortunately, is quite limited in terms of what it covers. And it certainly is not going to cover really conditions of the property itself, because they've not done anything. The title company, meaning the title insurance policy issuer, hasn't really done anything to evaluate whatever risks might be associated with the condition of the home. And likewise, your mortgage company, they're also not going to be of any assistance when it comes to any of that stuff, other than if they've got to get involved in defending their interests in the property, because there is enforcement action taken by the municipality over failed inspections, code violations, etc. They're going to send you a bill for what it costs them. So
what about insurability? Like if somebody has an older roof or something like that.
I like how you flashed to the number 2.
And then I asked you the question. That's what I do all the time.
Tune in next week, folks, for the home. What do we call ourselves now? Chicago real estate experts? Housing experts? Yeah. I don't know what the heck we're called. But tune in next week to Chicago Housing Experts to find out about what's going to happen when you get that letter from your insurance company saying, fix your roof, replace your roof, whatever it is in the next 30 days, or we're dropping you next week.
But that's not covered by the title insurance. I just want to get that absolutely clear.
Absolutely not. The title company will, they'll be like, lose my phone number.
Yeah, and same thing with the home inspectors. We're not going to be able to tell you if everything was permitted. Even though I have a software that I subscribe to and we run the program, that doesn't guarantee everything. It just gives us more information. That's it. And that's not something I want to ignore.
Do the due diligence. Hire someone that is going to help you with that. There's always going to be some risk associated with it, but usually the reward way outweighs it. I made a whole mouthful out of that, didn't I?
That's okay. It's at the end of the hour. We can go through everything again.
No one's listening.
Everybody's listening. The entire Chicagoland area loves us, and you know that.
Yeah.
Give me your contact information so we can wrap this up.
Find me on social media. I'm Patrick Loftus, real estate lawyer. Loftus_law on Instagram. Loftus Law on TikTok. Come watch my shorts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Loftus Law.
And my name is Charlie Belfontaine. I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. Our phone number is 312-544-9180. And I want to give special thank you to Henry, who took care of us today. Devin's out of the station right now.
He's got COVID for like the 25th time.
I'm sure there's some not truth to that at all.